How you doing?
How you doing, sir?
Good, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
Hi.
Hello, ma'am.
Let me just get your first and last name, please.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Jeremy, Jeremy. My last name is Vaughn, Vaughan.
I'm taking your words
I
to heart.
would consider them strong,
I
but
will.
All right, back on the record. Just before we get started, if we get close to finishing this afternoon, I'm wondering what everyone else's schedule is like. Is everyone able to hold over a little bit, or do we need to be somewhere at 5?
You know, Alabama plays, I don't know what time they kick off.
That is true.
I'll defer to the hearing officer.
It's my intention to get through these next two witnesses in the next 2 hours, and then the state will rest.
Great. Let's see where we are in another hour.
Yeah, if we need to stay over a little bit, that's fine.
Okay, sounds good. All right, Mr. Granada.
all right.
Mr. Vaughn, would you
Yes,
raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Mr. Vaughn, with whom are you employed?
I am employed by the New Mexico State Police.
And on or about March 20th of 2015, were you also employed with the state police?
I was.
And I'm just going to, well, can you tell the hearing officer and the board briefly about your experience as an officer?
I have 13 years with the New Mexico State Police, 5.5 years in uniform patrol out of the Socorro District. I did 5.5 years splitting my time between the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force and the State Police Zone 3 Investigations Bureau, which is primarily violent crimes. Since that time, I have also done time exclusively with violent crime in Albuquerque, and now I'm assigned to the United States Marshal Service Fugitive Task Force.
So I'm going to direct your attention to March 20th, 2015. About that time, you became involved with a case involving an aggravated battery allegedly committed by Officer Greer. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And can you tell me how you became involved with the case?
I was initially assigned by my supervisors, State Police in Albuquerque, and I was initially briefed by Sergeant Tony Cimbala of the Albuquerque Police Department, who is with their Internal Affairs Division.
Okay, and so how did you begin your investigation?
Initial investigation, we were given a lot of materials by the Albuquerque Police Department, including taser cameras, CAD reports, and all of that material that would be the background for the initial investigation which they conducted. They told us that they initially started that investigation as an internal administrative matter, and that it clearly became a criminal matter at some point. They needed it turned over to an outside agency for transparency issues. We were briefed by Sergeant Cimbala on the gist of the case, which included an apparent battery against a civilian in a motel parking lot. And at that point, we were going to begin the investigation with getting some background from a few individuals who had been informed about the battery by the initial reporting party, who was a cadet with the Albuquerque Police Department Academy.
Okay, so what were the first steps that you did? I understand that you obtained a bunch of evidence from Sergeant Cimbala. Did you begin to review all that evidence?
That was not reviewed initially. Really what I needed to do was set a foundation for the case to try to figure out what this case looked like and get some background information so that we could interview the reporting party. It's really important to kind of get our heads around the case so that when we interview the reporting party, we would know what avenues to take to try to determine his reliability and what had actually taken place.
And who is the reporting party?
The reporting party was the cadet. His name is Cadet Henry at the
Okay.
time. Now he's a police officer with Albuquerque.
And so did you begin by interviewing Cadet Henry?
I interviewed his training officer, Joe Manarino, who the cadet had confided in, reported the incident to initially. I also interviewed another cadet by the name of Joshua. I apologize, I don't remember his name offhand.
Trujillo.
Josh Trujillo. I wanted to get a feel for Cadet Trujillo to see if he was a reliable source, and then try to see that the information he gave me would match Officer Manarino, the training staff officer, and try to see if those coincided.
And did they coincide?
They did very, very well, with the exception of a few details.
Okay, do you recall what details didn't coincide?
I don't, without looking at my report. It had to do with the specifics of the battery itself, where blows where strikes were delivered and things like that. And,
Were both parties consistent in the fact that blows were delivered to Adrian Martell?
yes, they were.
Okay, and so next, what did you do next then?
At that point, I interviewed Cadet Henry, who gave me an extensive interview.
Okay, and so I guess kind of briefly summarize what Cadet Henry told you.
Cadet Henry indicated that he was in a ride-along program with the Albuquerque Police Department as a cadet, which is part of the normal training. He was assigned to an officer by the name of Roush. He informed me that Roush and Greer often work together, hand in hand, and often respond to calls together. He noted that he, early on in their conversations, particularly with Officer Greer, noted that they were aggressive. They were sort of outspoken about how they handled business, heavy war stories and that kind of thing. Said that they initially had responded to a couple of calls. There was a down and out in an alleyway off of Central in Albuquerque. There was a gentleman there that was laying down on the ground or a sidewalk, and that Officer Greer interacted with this gentleman, and that the gentleman asked Officer Greer, "Why do you hate me, man?" Officer Greer apparently told him, "I don't hate you," turned to Cadet Henry and said, "Do you want to know how to get these people to do what you want?" or something like that, how to get a response from him, and then took the down and out man's arm from behind the man, so had his arm behind his back, and picked him up in a very painful, aggressive way. Obviously got a loud groan out of this man, got him up, and then apparently released this man and didn't charge him with any crimes, let him go. Had another interaction that same day where they went to a small local grocery store in the area, and it's called the Fair and Square off of Central, not too far from the hotel where the main event took place. There's a gentleman that walked up to the two officers and the cadet, and the gentleman looked at the cadet, obviously recognized his blue shirt, and said, "Oh, you guys have a cadet, wow, that's great." Turned to Officer Roush, talking to the cadet, and said, "This is a good guy, this is a good guy right here," pointing at Officer Greer, said something very different, and I can't remember the specific words, but basically instilling some sort of sense of fear about this officer, to be concerned about him. And then he got into the case where they responded to a down and out at the Best Choice Motel on Central Avenue. They responded to the down and out, parked in the parking lot, observed. It's kind of an L shape. When you drive into the parking lot, you'll see the hotel here and then this way to the south. And the gentleman was up on the south branch of the motel, up on the second story balcony. They responded to him. They went up the balcony. There were Officer Roush, Officer Greer, Cadet Henry, and the down and out. And they had two police cars. They were in each car. And interacted with Adrian Martell, the down and out there on the balcony. Mr. Martell was the...
Let me interrupt you
Sure.
for a second. What's your understanding of the term down and out?
Gentleman who's fairly unresponsive, likely intoxicated or exhibiting things about the person that would make you think he's intoxicated.
And is that different from a suspicious person?
I would take it very differently than a suspicious person, yes.
Did you have a chance to review the dispatch audio?
I did.
Okay, and do you recall when the caller from the hotel made the call to the police, what was described in that call?
I don't recall that from the call. I did speak to the motel owner, though.
Okay. Go ahead.
So Adrian is there at the hotel, and the officers interact with him. They do normal, what you call normal police work, pick him up, Terry pat him, ask him what he's doing there. He's very lethargic. He's not answering questions clearly. He's clearly intoxicated to some level. And they Terry pat Mr. Martell and find 2 marijuana joints in his pockets, and then nothing else. So they walk him down the steps. There is a dumpster in the corner of the L of the motel. There's a dumpster in that area right near the stairwell. They sit Mr. Martell down on a parking curb right in that area. Cadet Henry and Officer Greer stay in that area. And Officer Roush goes back to his car, which is in the parking lot area, to run Mr. Martell's name, date of birth, driver's license type information.
Did Cadet Henry tell you what happened between Officer Greer and Adrian Martel?
Yes, he did.
And what happened?
Cadet Henry indicated that Mr. Marthel was completely compliant, never offered any verbal or physical resistance of any kind. That at some point, Mr. Marthel, sitting on the curb, looking up at the cadet, was sort of giving him a look of attitude. I'm not really sure how to describe it or how he described it, but just kind of looking at the cadet. Officer Greer told Mr. Marthel, "Don't look at my recruit, don't fucking look at my recruit," something along those lines, very aggressive language. And at some point, from behind Mr. Marthel, pushed him down toward the asphalt and delivered 2 blows with his closed fist. And he described the blows in very, very detail, strong detail, lifting his hand as high as it would go and delivering 2 blows to the right side of Mr. Marthel's face, leaving his face on the asphalt, and described Mr. Marthel's head as bouncing off the asphalt. And then he described believing Officer Greer responding to the pain in his hand, then delivering 2 blows to Mr. Marthel's right rib area on his flank. The cadet was very clear that these were unwarranted, unnecessary, didn't need to take place whatsoever.
And where was Officer Roush at this point in time?
Officer Roush was apparently still at his patrol car dealing with NCIC, his computer running Mr. Marthel's information.
Okay. And what else happened when Adrian Martel was sitting down on the curb?
Adrian Marthel was then lifted up, and apparently Officer Greer wrenched his arm in the same manner. He was handcuffed in the rear on the ground and brought up by those handcuffs, picking a man up with his hands behind his back, describes as very painful, and obviously I would understand that. And then Mr. Marthel was taken over to his patrol car, to Officer Roush's patrol car. At this point, Officer Roush makes the comment, "I'm going live." And Cadet Henry's understanding of that was that they were going to turn on their recording devices at this time.
Did you have an opportunity to take a look at the video that was made from this night?
I did not. That was reviewed by the case agent, Mitch Bingston.
Okay.
Agent, what's the name?
Mitch Bingston, B-E-N-G-S-T-O-N.
Okay, and did the cadet say anything else to you regarding the incident?
There was actually a lot of information beyond this. The officers then took Mr. Marthel into custody, placed him in the back of Officer Roush's patrol car, and there's dialogue between the 3 officers, the 2 police officers and the cadet, and Mr. Marthel about whether they should take him to jail or just let him go. And Cadet Henry said, "Well, we should just let him go." Cadet Henry expressed being very nervous, very upset, having an emotional response to the fact that this man had been beat up and didn't really need to be. Cadet Henry expressed the physical and emotional response that he viewed on Officer Greer's face, and what he observed Officer Greer do is to be extremely aggressive and concerning to him. Officer Roush indicated through some what appeared to be joking or kind of laughable conversation that they should not release Adrian, but go ahead and book him on the marijuana and a trespassing charge. And then they took Mr. Marthel to the Prisoner Transport Center in Albuquerque to have him booked there and transported to the Metro Detention Center. No medical care was given to Mr. Marthel, no ambulance responded, and no supervisor was notified.
All right. Did you make contact at the Best Choice Inn?
Yes, I did.
And what did that contact consist of?
Made contact with Mr. Wu, he's the owner of the establishment. We were told at the briefing by the Albuquerque Police Department that a sergeant had been sent down to that facility and that no cameras were observed. Mr. Wu obviously provided us with the location of his cameras. He has cameras. There was video, and we downloaded that video from his camera system.
And did you take a look at that video?
I did.
And what did the videos indicate to you?
The video is very grainy. It's dark outside, so the colors are gray and black and white. You can see the police cars pull in. At one point, you can see a cab pull in and drop off a passenger. There's the trash cans that I described earlier near the corner where the stairwell is. And you can't see where the officer and Mr. Marthel would have been standing next to Cadet Henry, and the incident actually would have taken place. The video is certainly too grainy to see any detail in that area, but it definitely shows the officers arriving, going up the stairwell, dealing with Mr. Marthel, bringing him down the stairwell where he's out of sight, and then bringing him back to the car to put him in the car and transport him out of there.
Did you notice any no trespassing signs posted in or around the inn?
I did not.
Okay, and when you had contact with Mr. Wu, did he indicate to you that Mr. Marthel had been trespassed from this location?
He didn't say that. What Mr. Wu's conversation with me was that he just wanted him removed from the premises.
Okay.
And that is typically Mr. Wu's stance. It was very clear in the conversation with Mr. Wu that he gets a lot of people around his motel in that area, particularly homeless people. He calls APD a lot, and he wants those people removed.
Okay. And as part of your investigation, did you try to determine if there are other people staying at the inn who might have witnessed this event?
I did a canvass of that particular area and discussed that with Mr. Wu as well, and we did make that effort, that's correct.
So can you describe the canvas of the area?
I knocked on every single door right within the immediate area, both floors, and I found a gentleman who's the maintenance worker there. I believe he's really the only one that I interviewed that
Is that Albert Garcia?
That is.
And what date did this canvas occur?
I wish I could tell you offhand, I don't recall. It was a few days later.
Okay, well, go ahead with your relaying what happened with the canvas, if you could.
Okay, Mr. Garcia, the maintenance worker there, lives on the second floor, so in the L shape, Mr. Marthel would have been east of the corner. Mr. Garcia lives north of that corner, and Mr. Garcia did not see or hear a battery, did not see or hear the confrontation, if you would call it that. He said that he believed he heard Mr. Marthel, didn't know Mr. Marthel's name, heard him being boisterous with the officers, and the officers were dealing with him, and the officers sounded like they were being reasonable. He was told by the officers to go back into his room, and I apologize, I described his residence incorrectly. He would have been the very corner house on the south end of that complex. The next door over would have been the door where Mr. Marthel was found located outside of. So one door back to the west is where this gentleman lives. He was told to go back into his room. His window was closed, his door was closed. He didn't see the officers once they went down the steps, so he did not see the altercation at the bottom of that staircase.
And do you have an audio recording of your contact with Albert Garcia?
Yes, I do.
And same thing with when you contacted the Best Choice and Mr. Wu, you have an audio recording?
I don't know how much of Mr. Wu's contact I recorded. He wasn't a witness in the case. My contact with him was to retrieve the video, so I don't know how much of that was recorded, if any at all.
Good. Did you contact any other individuals at the inn?
I contacted Orlando Frias, I believe is his name. He's the night manager
Okay.
that was working that night.
And was he the individual who called the police?
I believe he was, yes.
Okay. And can you tell us what you learned from your contact with Orlando Frias?
I don't recall the specifics. If memory serves me correctly, Mr. Frias had a down and out, wanted him removed from the premises, and did not see the altercation.
Okay. Did you have any contact with any other individuals?
I don't believe there were any more. I believe that was all the contacts at the motel.
Was there another individual by the name of Sublet?
Sublet was a gentleman that Officer Agent Bingston made contact with and located.
And you interviewed Officer Jerry Roush?
Yes, I did.
And can you tell us what you learned through interviewing Officer Roush?
Agent Bingston began the interview with Officer Roush.
Were you sitting in the same room with him?
Yes, I was. We interviewed him together. And Officer Roush came in, gave us an indication of what he had done and taken place, and we got an extensive chance to question him about that. Basically, what he said was they received a call for a down and out, and they had responded to this motel plenty of times, was familiar with it, went, parked in the parking lot, went up the stairs, ran into Mr. Marthel. He was intoxicated, fairly unresponsive, but cooperative. He gave the indication that Mr. Marthel was not resistant to them at any time, verbally or physically whatsoever. They found 2 marijuana joints on Mr. Marthel, and then they escorted him to the bottom of the stairs. Cadet Henry was also with him and Officer Greer responding. Mr. Marthel was placed on the curb and sat down, and then Officer Roush went back to his car to run, name and date of birth, check for warrants and warrants, normal police work back at his car. He said that he was sitting in his car, and out of the corner of his eye while he's dealing with his computer can see his fellow officer in his peripheral vision and realizes that his officer needs assistance. He doesn't know why. He immediately gets out of his car, hurries over to find the cadet standing nearby, Officer Greer over Mr. Marthel, handcuffing one hand, and assists Officer Greer in obtaining the other arm to handcuff it, and received no resistance in obtaining that arm whatsoever. Said he had absolutely no information whatsoever, including up to the point of the interview, as to why force had been used on Mr. Marthel, placing him on the ground. His face was on the ground at the time he responded. Mr. Marthel gave no verbal or physical resistance whatsoever. He did not know if force had been applied to Mr. Marthel as far as strikes, blows, or whatever the case might be, even up to the point of the interview.
Did you ask Officer Roush about the statement that he was alleged to have made about going live?
I did.
And what was his response?
We went around and around about his recording situation. I informed Officer Roush that we are familiar with their recording policy, which is to record contacts, and he agreed that is their policy. He could not tell me why he didn't turn his recorder on. He began by telling me that his recorder was unreliable, that he had problems with the wire hookup to his, where it connects to his belt. There's a recording device, there's a wire running up to the camera which sits on his shoulder. So we discussed his policy. His policy is to notify his supervisor and have that fixed. So I asked him if he did so. He indicated he did so. So we went back over the same material, and I said, does your recorder now work? He says, yes, now it works. So he began by telling me it doesn't work, then he told me that it did work. And we discussed the fact that their 2 recorders mysteriously came on at the same time. And he did not recall telling Officer Greer we were going live or we're going to turn our recorders on. And the point where I understood the recorders came on is after Mr. Marthel has been arrested, walked over to Officer Roush's car, and at that point, the incident is obviously over, then the recorders come on together. So I asked Officer Roush about that, and Officer Roush simply really wasn't able to give me an adequate answer as to why that might have taken place.
Did you ask Officer Roush about the allegations of Officer Greer rubbing his knuckles?
Yes, I did.
And what was his response?
I believe his response was that he didn't recall any of that.
You also interviewed the suspect, Adrian Marthel?
I was present for part of the interview with Adrian Marthel, and I don't know how much interview Agent Bankston did, but I know that when Adrian Marthel arrived at our office, he was in Agent Bankston's office, and I heard them and discussed briefly with them Mr. Marthel's injuries.
And can you tell us what that conversation consisted of?
There were some marks on Mr. Marthel's head that he indicated occurred during the incident. There was soreness to his right side. I don't know if there were any marks or not. And he also indicated there were broken ribs on his left side. Mr. Marthel was very specific that the injuries to his head and his right side were, in his understanding from this time frame of the incident, he was very specific that the broken or cracked ribs on his left side were not from this incident. They were from a separate incident.
Were you involved with gathering any medical evidence regarding Adrian Marthel?
I don't believe so, no.
I want to direct your attention back to one of the previous incidents that you mentioned with the down and out and the wrenching of a wrist. Were any statements made by Cadet Henry regarding that incident about a sort of alternative sobriety test, I guess.
The alternative sobriety test offered, the gentleman's name I believe is Mr. Cox, if we made that link adequately. Upon allowing Mr. Cox to leave, he was wrenched off the ground by his arm, and Officer Greer gave him the opportunity to take an alternative sobriety test to make sure he was okay to leave. He was told to make airplane noises and to hold his hands out to his side, acting like an airplane, and wander off down the sidewalk, and he would be allowed to leave.
Did you attempt to make contact with this down and out, Stephen Cox, I believe you said his name is?
The agents in this case did. I was not a part of that.
Did you have contact with any other witnesses that we haven't talked about?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And it's my understanding that you didn't interview Officer Greer, correct?
That is correct, I did not.
Okay. And you didn't review the video from that evening?
The lapel camera, the taser cameras?
Yes.
I did not.
Okay. Okay, initially you indicated that you had received a bunch of evidence from Sergeant Cimbala.
That's correct.
Can you tell us what evidence you did review?
I would have to look at my list, I apologize.
Okay, I have a copy here if I
Sure.
could just give you.
And I've also brought my own copy.
Okay, that's for council, I'm looking at NM8.
Thank you.
5 pages in, it's labeled as page 3 of your supplemental.
Okay. So of those, if I can go through my narrative, I can tell you.
Sure.
The PTC video from Sergeant Cimbala I was able to review.
Okay, and when you reviewed that video, did you find anything noteworthy?
It appeared to me as though Mr. Marthel had some markings, and I believe that was on the left side of his face, sort of a darker spot than normal, and it was something I could not see when Mr. Marthel came to our office.
Okay, would those markings be consistent with the story that Cadet Henry told?
In my opinion, yes.
Okay. Is there anything else from those videos that you noted?
That was all I noted there.
And was there a camera inside of Officer Roush's unit?
I'm unaware of them. The CAD reports and the dispatch contacts by the officers, also the MDT contacts, I don't believe that I found anything particularly significant in reviewing those.
Okay. Did you review the KDT messages between the two officers?
Yes, I did.
And was there anything noteworthy there?
I don't believe I found anything extremely noteworthy there. No.
Who was the officer? It's my understanding that eventually Officer Greer was arrested.
That's correct.
Did you prepare the affidavit for arrest?
I did not.
Was that Officer Bengtson?
Agent Bengtson.
Agent. Okay. After you interviewed the cadet, and you had made all these other interviews as well, did you find that the cadet's story was consistent?
Yes, I did.
In terms of the alleged criminal conduct?
Yes, I did.
Regarding Officer Greer?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
Just regarding Officer Roush's interview, we were really specific with Officer Roush, and he could not explain. He indicated that in every case in which he uses force, he does two things. He notifies the supervisor, and he calls EMS and gets medical attention. And we repeatedly cover those areas, and he simply did not do either one of those. despite the fact that he was aware that Mr. Martell's face was on the ground and his officer was on top of this gentleman. And in his peripheral vision and in his own assessment, he realized his officer needed help. And he immediately got out of his car and went over there to deal with that. And Mr. Roush made it very clear that he knew his officer needed help, but he has no information as to use of force. He did not notify his supervisor, did not call EMS.
Through your interview with Cadet Henry, did he relay an incident where Officer Greer was wrenching on Adrian's arm and asking him, who's the man? Something to that effect?
That's correct, and that occurred, if I remember correctly, after the 4 blows were delivered.
And again, through your interview with the cadet, did Officer Greer ask the cadet whether or not he had a camera on him?
Yes, he did.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
The cadet indicated that he was asked if he had a camera on him, and the cadet told him, basically, no, I won't be that person, I wouldn't be that person. What that meant to me was he wouldn't be a snitch against these officers.
Did the cadet tell you why he took a while to report this incident to his superiors?
The cadet had his child at the hospital that weekend, and obviously was dealing with that primarily, and his intention was to report to his training staff the following weekend, and that is his chain of command. That would be appropriate for him to do, is to reach out to his chain of command.
Did the cadet indicate that he was fearful of the officers?
He indicated clearly to me that there was some concern about reprisal. He was concerned about the fact that Officer Greer obviously can easily be armed. He was concerned for his wife's safety, and he expressed that to me.
Did he indicate to you that Officer Roush said your knuckle hurt again?
I'm sorry, can't hear you.
Or, let me rephrase that. Did you hurt your fist again? Is that what?
Officer Roush, I'm sorry, the cadet indicated that Officer Roush and Officer Greer were discussing the situation together after the incident in their patrol cars. And I don't recall how far after the conversation took place, and the cadet indicated that Officer Greer was rubbing his knuckles. Officer Roush asked him, "Did you hurt your hand again?" Officer Greer said something along the lines of, "Yes, it's going to be swollen," or "Yes, it hurts," something along those lines.
Did the cadet indicate that he was fearful of Adrian, the suspect?
The cadet?
Yes.
Absolutely not.
Did the cadet think that Adrian was going to perhaps flee?
He had no indication of that whatsoever that he expressed to me.
I have no further questions.
Mr. Giamatti.
Okay, so you indicated that, the cadet indicated that the head, Martell's head, was bouncing off the asphalt. Is that what he told you?
That's correct.
All right, so your report indicates that Trujillo says that, and that he knows Adrian's face hit the ground a couple of times. So you quote Trujillo as saying, quote, bouncing off the asphalt, but you don't summarize that. Could you have been confused as to who told you that?
Certainly possible, but I believe that Cadet Henry made that very clear.
All right, but can you show me in your report where you do reference with Trujillo?
Okay.
Let me just see something. You know, this is March 23rd, Trujillo's interview. Cadet Henry was specific to Trujillo that Officer Henry, well, maybe I'll let you read it so I'm reading it correctly, because that may stand to be corrected as we read it, but go ahead and read that line.
Counsel, where are you directing the question to?
Exhibit 8, page 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th full paragraph.
Cadet Henry was specific that Officer
Now, you
Henry...
have to speak a little slower.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Cadet Henry was specific that Officer Henry, I'm sorry, that's a typo,
Okay, now let's correct it as we go.
punched the man twice.
Go ahead.
Okay, do you want me to scratch
Yeah,
that?
please.
Officer
And you let the record reflect that
Greer.
interlineating Henry, and let's read from the start again. The corrected version is,
Cadet Henry was specific that Officer Greer punched the man twice in the side of the head to the point the man's head bounced off the concrete.
okay, that's in reference to Trujillo. Then you go on to interview I want to start with Henry. Okay, very good. At the bottom of page 6, beginning on 7, concluding on page, I guess, 13. Nowhere in your summary do you indicate that Henry tells you that bouncing off the asphalt. Is that right? Take a minute and make sure, I don't want to misquote you or misrepresent.
The subject's face had impacted the ground is the note that I made.
Okay, and that's what Henry told you.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, you have no reference to Martell's medical records? No history?
I am unaware of his medical history, and I don't believe I gathered any of that.
Excellent. And you don't know how this facial injury that you observed on the prisoner transport video, how he obtained that?
That's correct.
And you did not see anything. I mean, it's obvious, but let's put it on the record. You didn't see what happened.
That's correct.
There's nothing, no video memorializing what happened. The only witness to this was Martell, Henry, Roush, and Greer, correct?
And Mr. Sublett?
Well, we'll talk about Mr. Sublett. Did you interview Mr. Sublett?
I did not.
Okay. So the only witnesses to this incident, this call, was Roush, Greer, Henry, and Martell, right?
Objection, he's asked and answered that question.
Well, he added a fourth, so I'm asking the question again. He added a fifth.
I'm going to sustain that. Can you restate your question?
Sure. So we have Henry describing to you that my client Greer punched Martell 4 times, minimum.
Correct.
Okay. Martell didn't say that, right?
In the interview time that I spent with Martell, I did not hear him say that.
As a matter of fact, in the interview time that you spent with him, he describes 2 officers and possibly a third escort him down, put him in a patrol car, and book him, right?
I couldn't speak to that, I don't know.
Did you hear anything that would come close to that testimony, or were you out of the room when he said that?
I really couldn't say. As far as that interview is concerned, Mr. Amato, I refer
Defer
to
to the next
injuries.
detective?
I definitely defer to the next detective. But as
Okay.
far as I was sitting in that interview, he was discussing the specifics of his injuries.
All right, now, his injuries received that night, the 20th of March, when you sat in on that interview?
That he believes were from that incident, that's correct.
Is your testimony today that Martell represented to you that Officer Greer punched him 3 or 4 times, and that's how he got these injuries?
No, I wouldn't say that.
Well, let's hear what Martell told you, that you were present with.
What I understand from the interview is there is a time frame that we're discussing with him, that Agent Beeson is discussing with him, in which he believes this incident took place. Mr. Martell's memory is not clear on this matter, and he believes that he can't remember it all specifically. And he appeared to be very forthcoming about the matter. That he was clear that the 2 injuries, one to his head, one to his right side, soreness, and the mark on his head, on the top of his head or side of his head, were from what he believed from the time frame of this incident, and that the injury to his left side were not from this incident. So it is a more vague time frame than just March 20th at XYZ time, but within the scope of what we were discussing at that time, within Mr. Martell's ability to remember.
And that was a month approximately after the March 20th?
I believe that's true, yes.
And did you, as he was sitting during this interview, notice any injuries?
To his head, yes.
And could you describe that injury to the head?
Small healing laceration with some scar-type tissues around it.
And you were aware that either you or another case agent interviewed MDC, Metro Detention Center Medical. Were you aware of that?
I was aware that that was going to take place. I wasn't aware that it happened.
Okay, so you don't know the results of that?
I do not.
Did you know at that time, or have you learned since, that that injury that you saw during Martell's interview was pre-existing to March 20th, 2015?
I'm unaware of that.
Did you see any prior booking photos of Martell prior to March 20th, 2015?
I did not.
Prior to March 20th, 2015, do you know when the last time Martell sought medical treatment?
I do not.
You indicated that Martell indicated broken ribs to the left side. Did you independently confirm that?
Independently confirm what?
Broken ribs to the left side?
I did not. You would have to ask Agent Bingston.
Okay. Were you successful in reaching Stephen Cox after your involvement to this day? Have we ever interviewed Stephen
I believe
Cox?
he was interviewed, but that was not part of my portion of the investigation.
Okay. Do you know who interviewed him?
I do not.
All right. Give me just 1 second. So you brought your file with you today, and it comports with Exhibit 8. Is that right? May we take a moment and compare what you brought today with what's on 8? Here, I'll let you do that.
Okay?
Take a minute, make sure that 8 is complete with what you brought. I think it is, but let's just be sure.
Okay.
Whatever's easiest for you, I think that's it.
I'm sorry?
Let's skip a page here.
Oh, yes, there is. Okay, so this page is there.
You go to page 20. Page 20.
So you just want to skip ahead?
If you're comfortable with that.
Go.
I know counsel for the Attorney General's office wouldn't keep stuff out. I think we're just making sure that file's complete. Good to go.
Keep that
All right,
back.
thank you. Having done that, I'll pass the witness.
Just have a couple questions.
Sure.
I just wanted some clarification. I believe that you testified earlier that Cadet Henry told you that Officer Greer punched Adrian in the head once?
Twice.
Okay, twice. I just wanted to make sure it's twice. Do you know what, if there was a TBT given to Adrian the night of this incident?
I'm not aware of one.
I have no further questions then.
Anything else, Mr. Diamato?
I'll plead ignorance. What initials did you use, counsel, and what did they mean?
TBT?
Portable breath test.
Oh, portable breath test, okay.
Is that correct?
That's
I'm sorry
correct.
for
Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Hearing Officer.
That's correct.
All right,
All right, can this witness be excused?
you may.
Agent Vaughn, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you,
Appreciate
sir.
your time.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, be safe.
Tom?
Their investigations are called agents. It's a technical.
Fired?
Makes them feel
They're fired. Fired, yeah. No, this guy. This guy, right here.
Since we don't have like a state bureau,
Yeah.
it's sort of bureau investigation, just kind of that shit.
Exactly.
No, these are just the ones I pulled.
Life insurance and
Okay.
Yeah.
He's gone. He's gone. He's gone. He's gone. He's gone. He got fired. Gone. Wait. Gone. Somebody staked this guy up and buried him somewhere.
serious. That's good. That is nice.
Give me just a second.
Go ahead and have a seat, Agent. Thank you. She'll swear you in just a moment, she's getting caught up.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I've got some computer issues here with this thing.
No worries.
There's no such thing as computer issues.
It's user problem, right, user error. And could you give me your first name, please,
Mitch, or Mitchell, Mitchel,
and your last name?
Bingston, Bengston.
Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Agent Bingston, you're an agent, correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Can you, tell us where you're employed, please?
New Mexico State Police, and I'm currently with the Investigations Bureau.
Okay. And how long have you been with the state police?
Just past 15 years.
Okay. And prior to working with the state police, were you working in law enforcement?
No, I did not. I worked in corrections, and prior to that, military.
I'm going to direct your attention to the case that we're dealing with. You became involved with an incident that occurred on March 20th, 2015.
Yes, I did.
And can you tell us how you became involved with this case?
I was assigned, I believe it was March 27th, was assigned by my supervisor, Sergeant Jeff Smith, as one of the investigative agents, along with Jeremy Vaughn, who's an agent with state police as well, to begin doing an investigation. Due to some issues, I was working on another case at that particular moment, so Agent Vaughn actually went and began doing some interviews, and I was directed to go to the APD Southeast Sub, where I met with, I don't remember his name, but he provided me the two units which had previously been assigned to Officer Greer and Officer Roush there at the sub.
Okay. Was that Sergeant Cimbala? Is that
No, it was not. His name was Detective Nicholas Kramer.
Okay. And so what did you do to initiate this investigation?
My initial response, I went to the Southeast Sub in order to take possession of those two units. I sealed those and began and processed them later on. But as far as
and so the two units you're referring to are Officer Roush's unit and Officer Greer's unit?
correct.
Okay. And did you go ahead and did you direct Officer Vaughn to go ahead and begin the investigation?
He actually began it because I was working on a different case.
Okay.
That same day, he went and did an interview of, I believe it was a cadet, Henry.
Okay. And so you weren't there for that interview?
That's correct, I was not.
And so when did you assume duties for this case?
The following day, Agent Vaughn briefed me as to what the cadet had said and what he had done as far as going to the Best Choice Motel. And then from there, I began doing other field work with this investigation.
And so what did that other field work consist of?
I went to the Best Choice Motel
Okay.
and was able to speak to the daytime manager, was Mr. John Wu. Spoke with him, and he directed me. He said that he had not been there during the incident. Directed me to his maintenance supervisor, Albert. Let me look at his name. Garcia, yes. Said that he had been there, so directed me to his room. He kind of permanently stayed in one of the motel rooms.
Was Officer Vaughn with you?
He was not.
Okay, so go ahead and proceed with your contact with Albert Garcia.
When I talked with him, he gave me much of the same information that he had given to Agent Vaughn, but he also provided a different piece that he hadn't provided Agent Vaughn, that after the incident, he had spoken to one of the other residents that had been in the hotel on March 20th, on the night of this incident, and he said that the resident of room 118 had told him that resident had observed this incident, and what he described, he said that the guy said officers punched and kicked the person they were arresting. So I went back to the main office and spoke with Mr. Wu, and he provided me records for who had been staying in room 118 for a little over a month, I believe, was the time frame that the person had been staying in that room.
And what was that person's name?
Derek Sublet.
Okay, did you make contact with Derek Sublet?
I did, but not until sometime later.
Okay, now going back to this contact with Albert Garcia, did you record that contact?
I did.
Okay, and you indicated that the information that he provided you was basically similar to the information that he provided Officer Vaughn?
Correct.
With the addition of this new potential witness to the crime?
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything else important about your contact with Albert Garcia?
No, there was not.
Okay, and was there anything noteworthy about your contact with Mr. Wu, the owner of the motel?
No.
Okay, and so eventually you did make contact with Derek Sublet. Can you tell me when that occurred and how that occurred?
That was almost a month after, I believe it was April 20th. If I may, I'm going to look and make sure that I'm giving you the correct date. April 18th is when I made contact with Mr. Sublet. And what he said is he had been staying in in room 118, and he had been outside of his room. He observed two APD officer units, 2 police cars in the parking area, and 3 police officers walking down the stairs with a subject. He didn't know who he was. They walked down the stairs with that subject, had him sit down facing the west portion of the building on a parking curb, and at that point he went back inside of his room.
And that was room 118 still?
Correct.
And where is room 118 in relation to where Adrian was sitting down with the officers?
Room 118, the building is shaped in kind of an L configuration from the main parking lot.
Okay.
118 faces directly to the north. The door and the window to that room faces north, and the parking curb that he indicated that the officers had the subject sit down on was north and west of his window. The only thing in that area was the stairway that led up to the second floor, and then so he was just outside of that room.
Approximately how many feet away would you say?
My guess would be 15 to 20 feet.
Okay. And so what did Mr. Sublet tell you about what he witnessed?
He said he opened his door again, and when he opened his door again, he observed the male subject was laying down on the opposite side of that parking curb. He could not see which end his head was on, but he was definitely laying down behind that parking curb. And one of the officers was punching straight down to where that subject was. He said he thought he saw 3 or 4 punches that were straight downward.
Okay. Did he tell you anything else?
He did say that he didn't hear subject make any noise. He didn't see any resisting. He didn't see anything to lead him to believe that the subject was being non-compliant.
Okay. And let's see, who else did you interview in your investigation of this incident?
I spoke with Eugene Vezi, who was the paramedic at Metro Detention Center that actually checked Adrian Marthel into the Metro Detention Center through their medical system.
Okay, and what did Mr. Vezi say?
He said that they don't typically document or they don't check for any injuries beneath the clothing. They only document any complained of injuries, and they only document those that need care, stitches, bleeding wounds, anything like that. Those are the only types of things that they would document. He did recognize a picture of Mr. Marthel, but didn't. He pulled up once he pulled up his file. He said There were no notes or, indications of any injuries. There was a note that very specifically said no injuries were noted.
Okay, so no medical services were provided to Adrian that evening?
That's correct.
When Adrian was booked, was there a breath test given to him that you're aware of?
He was put on an alcohol watch, and with that, they do breath tests until they're down below a certain level, and that's just from what I know of Metro Detention Center. In this particular case, the medical records that I was able to get from the detention center showed that he was at a .179, and that was a little bit later on in the evening.
Was there a blood sample taken?
Not that I know of.
So they didn't test him for any other substances in his body?
Correct.
Okay. But they did put him on a watch to make sure that he was okay?
Yes, they did.
And it's your understanding that Adrian didn't complain of any injuries?
Not until the next day.
Okay. And the next day, what kind of injuries did he complain of?
He complained of, he said that his face, the face and his ribs on his right side were hurting, and that there were cuts on the back of his head which were bleeding.
Okay. Did you ultimately interviewed Adrian Marthel, is that correct?
I did.
Okay. Can you tell us about the interview?
Mr. Marthel was, he said that he didn't remember much of what had happened. He said prior to that, he had been renting a room jointly with a family there at the Best Choice Motel. The room was in their name, and they had left to go get some food. He had left and walked up Central to Wyoming, where he made contact with some gentlemen there. They began drinking. He had a pint of vodka, some shots. They had given him 2 marijuana cigarettes, which he put into his pocket. After he partied with them, so to speak, for a little while, he walked back to the hotel, went up to the second floor, knocked on the door, and the people that he was staying with, they had not returned back to the room from getting food. He knocked on the door, no answer, so he stayed there just outside the room. He said that he was standing there and he was very dizzy, he was very intoxicated, said that he didn't feel like he could stand up for much longer. He was actually holding onto the rail, and so he sat down just outside of that room. He said he sat down, and shortly after that, he was contacted by Albuquerque police officers.
Was there any attempt to rouse him by any of the employees of the hotel and tell him to get off the property or something to that effect?
I don't know. I didn't speak with any of the other employees.
You never spoke with Orlando Frias?
No, that was Agent Vaughn, I believe.
Okay. Did you listen to the dispatch recordings for that evening?
I did not.
Okay. So you didn't, okay, Agent Vaughn interviewed Orlando Frias. There's another individual, Seth Abeta, I think it's Abeta or Bieta.
I'm sorry, Seth what?
It's spelled A-B-E-I-T-A. Did you contact that individual?
I did not.
Okay, fair enough. Who else did you interview in this investigation?
I believe those were the only people that I spoke with.
Did you interview Officer Rausch?
I did, yes.
Okay, and tell us about that interview.
Officer Rausch was very, very articulate. He was able to tell me very specifically the call that he had answered prior to this one. And he was able to tell me the specific route he had driven from that call previous to this call. Once he was able to tell me very specifically where people were standing as far as he, Officer Greer, and the cadet when they were walking up the stairs. And then once he began with his statement of his contact with Mr. Marthel, he became very vague. And when we'd ask him for specific information regarding their contact and regarding things that were said and done, he said that he could not recall. So for him to go from being very specific, up to including the route that was driven, to become very vague, it was my feeling that information was being left out of his statement. He said that they had been dispatched to a subject who was down and out. There was a clothing description that was given. I don't remember exactly what that was, but that he was on the second floor of the Best Choice Motel. When they arrived, the three of them went up the stairs, made contact with him. He was very compliant throughout the duration of their contact, or of his contact. Officer Greer pat-searched Adrian Marthel first, and then Officer Roush conducted a secondary pat-down. He said that his nose was very stuffed up due to allergies. It was March time frame, and so he was having difficulty breathing, but he did say that he smelled the odor of marijuana as well as an odor of alcohol coming from Mr. Marthel. So when he did a secondary pat-down, he felt what he believed were two marijuana cigarettes, pulled those out of Adrian's pocket, and they were indeed marijuana cigarettes.
And this pat-down was pat-down for weapons?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Did he ever indicate that he thought about preparing a search warrant or something to that effect?
He did not.
Okay. And so what happened next?
At that point, they escorted Mr. Marthel down the stairs, and then had him sit down on the parking curb that was described by Mr. Sullivan. At that point, he had gotten identification or verbal identification, I believe, from Mr. Marthel, so he went to his unit, Officer Roush did, in order to confirm that ID using his computer. While he was there at his computer, he looked up and saw that Officer Greer was standing above Adrian, who was laying down. He says, I don't remember what position, if he was laying down or sitting down, but he does remember Officer Greer was standing above him and had one of his arms above him, and he didn't know if Adrian had tried to run away or if he was resisting or if something was going on, so he got out of his car and went over to where they were. At that point, he grabbed a hold of the other arm of Adrian Marthel, and he said that he felt no resistance once he grabbed that arm, placed that into a handcuff, reached over and took the other arm from Officer Greer and put that one into the handcuff as well, and he said that he felt no resistance at any time while he was handcuffing him.
Okay. Did you interview Cadet Henry?
I did not.
Did you have an opportunity to review the lapel cams of the two officers that evening?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and what did you learn by reviewing the lapel cams or taser cams?
There were 6 videos total between the two officers. There were 2 from Officer Greer's camera and 4 from Officer Roush's camera. About 5 in the evening, shortly before 5 p.m. Of that same date, of March 20th, there was one video from each of their cameras that showed them speaking with a female subject in kind of a dirt parking lot area. Those were very short in duration. Also during that video, I believe it was on Officer Greer's camera, Cadet Henry became visible. So we knew we were looking at the correct date with the correct people and cameras. Then the next videos, and if I may look, because there were 4 others, and I want to make sure I get them in the right order.
Please do.
The third video in sequence, and I documented them in order of the time that they were recorded. The next one was at about 29 hours. It was from the lapel camera of Officer Roush, and it was about 2.5 minutes, including the buffer, which during the buffer portion of the video, there's no audio. It's video only. That was of Officer Roush searching Adrian Marthel. He was actually in handcuffs and standing against the police unit at that time.
Okay.
That the recording was begun.
Okay. So you never interviewed the cadet?
That's correct.
Did you review the interview that Officer Bond did of the cadet?
No, just his verbal, when he briefed me of what the information was in that interview.
And so when you reviewed the two videos, were they incomplete in terms of start to finish when they arrived on the scene and having contact with the suspect?
The video began after he was already in handcuffs, from both Officer Greer and Officer Roush. Both of their cameras came on just shortly one after the other. There was a small time delay, very small, but both of them began after he had already been handcuffed and was standing against the police car. And then there was an additional two more videos that were both from the camera of Officer Roush. One was after the handcuffing and everything had taken place, and he was placed inside the unit, and Officer Roush was speaking with the manager or someone behind the counter of the Best Choice Motel. And then another one shortly after that from Officer Roush's camera it was recorded the entire duration of the transport from the Best Choice Motel to the Prisoner Transport Center, which is downtown.
And was there anything noteworthy about those videos?
Yes, in the final video, the transport video, in the majority of the video was them driving, and the camera was facing forward, so it was not able to see anything, but it captured Mr. Marthel asking questions and Officer Roush answering them. What was interesting in that video was at the very end of it, once they had gone inside of the PTC, or the Prisoner Transport Center, it was a very well-lit area, and Officer Roush had Adrian sit down on a metal bench that's there just inside of the doors. And when Adrian turned around and faced towards Officer Roush, and he was sitting down, you could see the right, or I don't remember which side of his face, the side of his face and the top of his head had large red blotches on it that looked to be abrasions.
And were those abrasions consistent with the story that Cadet Henry had told?
Yes, it is.
And were you involved with doing research on medical conditions regarding Adrian?
I transported him, or I took him to the Loveless Medical Center.
And when did this occur?
This was on April 21st.
So about a month after the alleged incident?
Correct.
And so what happened when you took him to Loveless?
They did x-rays of his ribs, and they said that the documents that they provided said that there was considerable bruising to the right side of his ribs.
Okay. Is there anything else that you learned through taking him to Loveless?
No.
Did you request any other medical documents for Mr. Martel?
I requested, no, just from that day, were the medical documents that I had.
Did you ask Officer Roush about the allegation that he had told Officer Greer, okay, I'm going live?
I did.
And what did he say?
He said that I'm going live is something that was very commonly said. Officers would say that to other officers to alert them that they were turning their cameras on. He could not remember whether he had said that on this incident or not.
Okay. And from your review of those videos, does it look like he said, I'm going live, and then the video started recording?
I don't know what he said prior to the video coming on or the audio portion starting.
Okay. But they did start recording around the same time?
The videos did start very close to each other.
And which occurred after the arrest of Adrian Martel?
That is correct.
Okay. Is there anyone else you spoke to regarding this case in the investigation?
No, there was not. I did speak, it wasn't a formal interview, but I did speak with the acting supervisor for Swing Shift Southeast Area Command, Officer Thomas William. It was an informal conversation. He said he didn't know either Officer Roush or Officer Greer very well, but he did know that they would normally respond to calls together, and they would advise any other units, once they announced that they were taking that call, they would tell other units that they could stop responding, which for state police, that's an odd thing. He did say that was pretty common practice for their troops.
Let's see, did you conduct an investigation to try to find out who an individual named Stephen Cox is?
I did not.
And did you prepare the affidavit for arrest?
Yes, I did.
Of Mr. Greer? Did you arrest Mr. Greer?
I did.
Did he make any statements upon being arrested?
He did not.
And it's my understanding that he hasn't given a statement?
That is correct.
It also appears from your report that you took a DNA sample from Adrian.
Yes.
And did anything come of that DNA?
No, that was to compare against some bloodstains from when I processed the 2 units that I had spoken about earlier. That was to compare to see if it was possibly his, and it came back conclusively that it was definitely not his DNA that was located inside of those units.
There was blood in both units?
No, it was only in that of Officer Greer, I believe. I can tell you for sure.
Sure.
Unit George 5-9. I don't have documented.
But in any event, it didn't...
Correct, it did not come back, it did not tie into this investigation.
Did Officer Roush give any statements regarding his use of the recording device?
He did. He said that he tries to record all incidents in their entirety, and asked him if his camera had been working or operating correctly on this particular evening. He said that he hadn't noted any malfunctions or any problems, and the fact that we did have a video from earlier in that same day showed that the camera had been working operational just prior to on this same shift.
And when you went to the inn, did you notice any no trespassing signs?
I did not.
Okay. And with your contact with Mr. Wu, did he indicate that Adrian had been trespassed from this location?
He did not indicate that to me. I don't remember if Agent Vaughn had said anything to that nature.
I'm going to pass the witness.
Mr. Diamato.
Thank you. Let's start with paramedic Eugene Vezzi.
Yes, sir.
That's noted in the report. And it says, Vezzi told you, V-E-Z-I-E, I don't know if I'm butchering his name, Vezzi or Vezzi.
Now, I'm not sure.
Okay. Told you that the normal process for checking persons was to take their vitals upon arrival, visually check them for outward signs of injury, all right?
Correct.
And he didn't see any.
And he also specifically said they didn't check underneath any clothes that were worn.
Correct, but the only injuries that they do typically document are those needing care such as stitches or bleeding, correct? Okay. They didn't find any bleeding at that point, correct? I mean, it would have been noted in his medical file at NBC.
I can't speak for him as to what he saw, but that is what he told me.
Okay. You do note in concluding VZ's interview, quote, Eugene informed me there was a specific note of Adrian not having injuries at the time he was booked on March 20, 2015. That's correct, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so you didn't interview Martell. You sat in portions of it, or did you do the whole interview?
I was in with Agent Vaughn during the entirety of that interview.
And during your interview, Martell never said 2 officers beat me up, correct?
Correct.
And you didn't interview him after that first interview, right? His memory was, He thought he got beat up in jail.
No, he said that he thought that he had gotten jumped.
Right, after his arrest. Or did he say?
He didn't say before or after his arrest.
Okay, let's look. Let me see something real quick. He was from one of the first folks that you interviewed, or one of the last?
He was one of the last.
Okay. He tells you during his interview, I don't know when you interviewed him, but it looks like he remembers 2 police officers, right?
Correct?
Making contact with him on the second floor.
Yes.
They took him downstairs, and he thought they took him directly to a police car, right?
Correct.
And transported to jail,
Yes.
right? He does remember the officers telling him that he was being arrested for criminal trespass and possession of marijuana, right?
Correct.
He tells you that during the ride to the jail, Adrian said he remembered asking officers if they would just let him go. He told you that, right?
Yes, he did.
And he told you why. Because if he got booked, he was going to lose his stuff at the motel, right?
Correct.
He was staying with the people in room,
I don't
I
know
don't
which one.
know,
On the second floor,
upstairs, on the
yes.
second floor, right? Okay, and so the reason he asked to be released, that he told you, was that he wouldn't lose personal belongings.
Correct.
He what?
Would not lose personal belongings. Do you know this man to be a homeless man?
Off and on, yes.
And based on your training, education, experience, when you're homeless, the personal belongings you have is your whole world, right?
That's what you have.
What you carry is what you, okay. So it's important that he kept his personal stuff. But then he says, when he woke up at the Metro Detention Center, he was hurting badly. And he thought he must have been jumped while he was drunk, right?
Correct.
Okay. He never identified. He was pretty accurate, and his memory was good. 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs tells you who he's living with. He got into a fight with his brother a couple of weeks earlier. That's when he broke his left ribs,
On the left side, yes.
okay, and was beat up pretty good by his brother 2 weeks ago. I guess it was sometime in the first or second week of March.
Well, the only injury that he said that he had sustained was the broken ribs on his left side.
Okay. But I can imagine that with broken ribs comes contusions, right?
I don't know.
Don't know. I'm not a doctor, I'm not gonna hold you to that standard. Okay. So his memory was really, really good when he told you what was going on in his life on the 20th of March. He allowed Elizabeth Castillo and her son and her husband to share the room with him, right?
Correct.
He rented the room, which had expired. He remembered that, right?
Yes.
He remembered that he pooled his money with Elizabeth, and that Elizabeth and her family had gone for food, right? He remembered that. He walked on Central, down Wyoming, where he met a group of guys. They all drank 3 or 4 shots with these guys.
As well as he said a pint of
Vodka.
Of vodka.
A pint of vodka. And did he tell you at that time, the day before, the 19th, he had done 2 grams of heroin?
He
tell
did
you
not.
that? Okay. Did you learn that from the MDC earlier?
I didn't. I don't have that information anyway.
Okay, super. So he then walks back to the motel room and knocks on the door where he was sharing with Elizabeth. She had not come back yet with her family, right? So he sits down. Now, here's my question.
Well, he said that he had been standing up. He was beginning to become very intoxicated. He was getting dizzy, holding onto the rail, and at that point is when he sat down.
Perfect. Did he tell you what time he got back to his room from Wyoming and Central?
He did not.
Can you tell the hearing officer how much time he had been there prior to Officer Greer's and Roush's arrival?
That I don't know.
Minutes, hours, you don't know?
No, I don't know.
All right. So, he gets booked, he wakes up, they check him, but according to your report, he could not remember most of what happened. It sounds to me like he remembered a lot of what happened, except that he didn't tell you that he remembered Greer punched him 4 times. Is that what you mean by a bad memory? He didn't tell you that Greer beat him up? What didn't he remember?
What's your question?
What didn't you remember? You said his memory, I'm reading from you, Adrian could not remember most of what happened that night.
Objection, calls for speculation.
Wow. If you know,
Sustained.
in what way was his memory faulty?
Well, the last sentence that you didn't read is, he could not remember most of what had been said to him by the officers.
Okay. But he does remember them telling him that he was being booked on possession of marijuana and trespassing, right? Let me see, 1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph down, page 15. Officers indicated to him he was being arrested for criminal trespass and possession of marijuana. You remember that, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, did you take photographs when you interviewed him of his face?
I did.
Did you take photographs of his bruising?
Actually, Agent Vaughn took the photos, but I was standing there, and I believe that we did take photos of his sides.
Okay, so, and based on your memory, was there bruising on the side?
I don't remember seeing any.
Okay,
I would have noted it otherwise.
okay. So, let me see if I can get this right. I don't want to confuse myself or trip you up. Sometime on the 27th or 28th, you interviewed Adrian Martell.
I interviewed him on April 20th.
Oh, perfect. Okay, April 20th. So between March 20th and April 20th, he has no clue who beat him up, right? March 20th, the day it is.
Correct.
And the day of your interview, he has no idea who beat him up. He thought he was beat up while he was drunk, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then, and he confirmed that with you during his interview?
During the interview, yes.
Okay, cool. So the next day, you bring into Loveless, quote, states he was beat up by the police a month ago. Who told him that? Who told him that he was beat up by the police?
I wasn't there when he spoke to the medical personnel. I'm not sure where they got that information.
You saw this in your report, right? At ER?
Yes.
Did you ask him? You saw this and said, wow, man, he told me just yesterday, he don't remember who beat him up. Now I'm reading it, one day later, he's saying he's beat up by the cops. Well, Adrian, come back in for a second interview. Did that happen?
He did not.
Okay. So, and did he indicate to you during his interview that he had a chest wall injury?
No, the only injury that he said that he had prior to this was the ribs on his left side.
No, we're talking about the injury that he allegedly received on March 20th by the hands of my client. I mean, he didn't never tell you that my chest wall hurt, right?
He said the ribs in his right side.
Okay. So he tells this at 12:19. What time did you get to Loveless? About noon? You transported her, right?
I did. I'd say 11:30, and then however long we waited in the waiting room.
Okay, all right. And you indicate the x-rays show bruising, contusions on the rib. Is that, did I hear you right?
The medical staff, when I spoke with the x-ray tech, said that she saw bruising on the x-rays, bruising on the ribs.
Is that anywhere on this medical report? Because x-rays don't show bruising, right?
It says signed and chart, ordered x-rays. The nurse didn't see the patient. Brought back from x-ray and put into waiting room. Called several times to evaluate, but he had already left. Ready for final disposition.
That was over Jennifer DiCecco's signature electronically, I think.
Where is that?
Right there. Yep. I'm sorry, yeah. Right there.
Attending doctor was Jennifer DeCicco or DeCicco? Yeah, something.
Some Italian, Irish. Okay, so nowhere in that Loveless record does it show bruising on the ribs, correct?
And that,
On this document?
in that document, you had to be noted.
All right. All right. So let me just see some. So on April 21st, at about, we're going by this emergency department chart, 12:19. His temperature's good, his pulse is good. Aside from Adrian Martell, who we now learn told Loveless, the day after he told you he didn't know, April 21st, he's telling people that he was beat up by the police. Is there anyone else telling you that he was beat up by the police?
Derek Sublett,
Derek Sublett, let's talk about Derek Sublett. Have you run backgrounds on him?
I have not.
I'll show you something.
You're going to show them evidence that I do not have and it's been excluded.
Well, I'm not going to admit it, I'm just going to impeach him.
I still object.
Draw my attention to the upper right-hand corner of the arresting officer.
Mr. Hearing Officer, if I may say a couple things.
Yes, you may.
Mr. Sublet's listed on my witnesses. I don't have them here today. I could get them. It was my understanding that this would take more than 2 days. In any case, we've already discussed the fact that any evidence used to impeach a witness or to rebut a witness will be excluded.
That's not what
This is precisely the type of evidence that I'm talking about. If this evidence was provided to me, my trial would have changed. My whole strategy could have changed.
I'll withdraw the exhibit. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm not going to, but I can't ask him. Were you?
I'm going to give you a
Well,
little
just
bit of
one more question.
latitude.
Well, I mean, it's something that, it's important that this investigator know, and it's important that the hearing officer know.
And if it's so important, then I should know too, and I should have a copy of it.
Sure.
Let's do it.
I mean, it's a question, doesn't need a document. Were you aware that about 5 months before you interviewed Derek Sublett, 6 months, that Officers Roush and Greer arrested Derek Sublett?
I maintain my objection.
So you aware of that?
You can answer the question.
I was not aware of that.
Okay. And Sublett says he observed an officer kicking
Correct.
Martell, correct?
Correct.
He did not tell you he observed.
Actually, he did not say kicking. Adrian Garcia
Said Sublett told him
Sublett told him that.
that he was kicking.
But when I directly interviewed Mr. Sublett, he said that all he saw was 3 or 4 punches straight down. He didn't say any officers' names.
Okay.
He didn't identify anyone.
All right. Did you confront him with the question, hey man, didn't you tell Garcia that you observed somebody being kicked?
I did not. There's a difference between him talking to somebody that he happens to know or happens to meet versus an interview with me.
All right. Just a second. The DNA is not relevant to this case. I think you testified to
Yes,
that,
sir.
right? And did you try to enhance the audio on the prisoner transport route? You have that ability, right? To
I
enhance
don't.
audio? The department does it?
Correct. I turned it up really loud, if that helps.
Have you interviewed or did some follow-up with Stephen Cox?
I did not.
Did you find any witness that would confirm what the cadet Henry told you about what happened?
other than Mr. Sublet and
No, I'm talking about the Stephen Cox incident earlier. Are you familiar with Stephen Cox?
I was given some information about that by Agent Vaughn, but I didn't have anything to do with that portion of it.
Okay, all right. Wait for just a second. I think we will be out of here by 5. Did you, in researching Martell, did you look at any previous booking photos?
I did.
And did the same injuries appear in the prior booking photos?
They do not.
They do not?
They do not.
Do you have copies of those prior booking photos?
Not with me.
Because one of the witnesses, two witnesses.
They were included in my report that you should have.
The booking on March 20th.
The booking on March 20th, as well as, I believe that there was one
April
other
of
before that.
2014?
Yes. And they were two obviously different photos. They didn't recycle it like I know they sometimes do.
Right. Okay. Because there was witness testimony today saying that that which was shown on his face on March 20th, 2015 is the same type of facial description, injury, scarring, redness on a prior booking photo.
No, I'm the one that pulled the booking photos from MDC, and the two that I received were very obviously different photos.
So now your testimony is at the Prisoner Transport Center, make sure I'm correct, we have red flushing on the side of the face?
On the upper, I believe it was the
Upper right
right
or
side,
left?
upper right side and up onto the forehead type area. And that was actually on the video that was from Officer Rauch.
Okay, and the booking photos showed injuries where?
On the same side of the face, upper right side of the, I believe it was right side, upper right side of the face and up into the forehead area.
Did you brief with Sergeant Cimbala with Internal Affairs?
No, I did not.
So did Officer Vaughn tell you that Cimbala interviewed somebody at MDC?
No, he did not.
So if Cimbala testifies that he interviewed somebody at MDC, I'm trying to find that interview so I could show you. That would be not correct. Let's just see something.
I didn't know that he did, and I wasn't present during that interview, so I couldn't tell you if it was correct or not.
Could you repeat your answer, please?
Yes, I wasn't present during the interview, and I wasn't aware of one, so I couldn't tell you if it was correct or not.
I'm going to Exhibit 45. And this is a transcript of an interview Sergeant Cimbala had on March 24th with male or female, K-A-A-K-I, Jackie, K-A-A-K-I, Kaki or Kaki. And so, on the third page, take a minute and read that, lines 40 to 48.
Okay.
All right, that's inconsistent. That representation by Sergeant Cimbala is inconsistent with your testimony today.
Objection, I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Well, isn't it true that what you just read indicates that Jackie,
Why don't we have the witness read that into the record? Is that
Sure.
acceptable?
Sure.
That way, Mr. Granada can know what we're.
Line 40 by, I believe her name is Jackie, says, so he hasn't seen any, or he hasn't been seen by anyone. Let me look at his intake, see what his intake says. Ribs injury, complaining of, but he says, have you been seen by a doctor in the past 6 months? Said, yes, rib injuries, vodka, detox, oh, he's pretty wasted. It doesn't, let me look one more place, so the only medical that has seen him there are no notes or nothing about there being any kind of injury or black eye or busted face or anything. And then Sergeant Cimbala, there's nothing like that, okay. And then she replies, okay. Sergeant Cimbala, that's all I was curious about is if, and she says yes, or yeah, Sergeant Cimbala, because I could see a little bit of redness like above his, like on his forehead in the booking photo, but I couldn't tell if those were scars or if it was fresh or not. And then she says, yeah, I'm there, so he hasn't complained to any medical. Hold on, yeah, those kind of look like scars to me. Sergeant Cimbala, okay. And she says, yeah, and if you look at his previous bookings, it almost looks like he has the same ones. And he says, okay. Sergeant Cimbala says, okay.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Now, you also,
I'm sorry, what was the question though?
that's inconsistent with your testimony today. You're saying that the previous booking photos do not reflect those injuries, correct? The scars on the face.
This, while hearsay evidence is admissible, this is not the type of hearsay evidence that should be admissible. We have no idea who this person Jackie is. We do not know what previous bookings she's looking at. This is a testimony that she's given to Sergeant Cimbala, and we have a completely separate witness here who has not even reviewed this before. It seems to be very far away from any type of reliable evidence that the hearing officer can rely upon.
I'm gonna let it in, and I'll give it the weight that it deserves.
Thank you. All right. So you also had an opportunity to review Adrian Martell's mental health assessment at MDC, correct?
Some of it, yes.
All right. And part of the MDC mental health asks if there was a previous head injury, right?
I don't remember most of those
Can
documents.
you refresh your memory?
Please.
Sure.
We looking at the same exhibit, Counselor?
No, I'm just refreshing this witness's memory.
What are these?
These are documents that you provided.
That I provided?
Yes,
Okay.
that.
Counsel, can you tell me what you're looking at,
Well, I'm just using to refresh his memory first, and if he doesn't, then I'll.
please? Well, I believe that you should show me what you're showing me.
Sure. Sorry. There you go, thanks.
This is whose report?
Adrian Martell's mental health assessment at MDC. About a fourth of the way down, you'll see.
Is this one at the evidence?
It is not.
Okay, and once again, I'll raise my objection. This hasn't been provided.
Sustained.
Wait, may I make a record? One can refresh a witness's memory by a bowl of spaghetti. And if the bowl of spaghetti is not on the witness list, I still can refresh his memory. I ask you to reconsider, man. It's simply for refreshing memory.
Oh, wow, it's a
Thank you.
refreshing memory.
All right. Does that refresh your memory? And you can lead through from the beginning of it, that was
I don't remember this being in my report at all. These are all dated before,
3/20/2015.
all dated before that, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so I don't believe that these were part of my report. Were they?
That's scary. I got them from the state who has represented, I'll withdraw the question. If these are not part of you, this
Well,
was,
I don't know if they are or not, but I don't remember them.
okay. fair
They're
enough.
all dated before
Yeah, that's
March
a
20.
pre-existing March 28 injury. Right? That's my question. Were you aware that Adrian Martell suffered a head injury prior to March 20th, 2015?
I've raised my objection again regarding the evidence that wasn't provided to me.
Well, I mean, were you aware of that? Yes or no? And if it's no, then I'm done.
I'm gonna allow this one more time and give it its due weight.
Yeah, one more question, and that's it. I mean, were you aware at the time you interviewed Martell or took him to the Loveless Hospital a month after March 20th that he had pre-existing head injuries?
I was not.
Thank you. That was easy.
That top page is gonna come off.
Yeah, we'll talk after. Was there any way to enhance the photographs at your office or through your agency?
There's not.
No?
No.
I think I'll pass the witness.
Just a couple of questions. When were the photos taken of Adrian Martell's body to determine whether or not there were injuries?
The photos that we took,
Yes.
those were done on the day of his interview, April 20th.
So that was about a month after this alleged incident?
Correct.
When Adrian Martell was booked, he had a BAC through the PBT of .17.
Yeah, .179, I think.
Your training and experience, is that pretty intoxicated?
It's different for different people, but that's usually pretty high. That's usually pretty intoxicating.
Double the legal limit
It
if
is.
you were driving? And additionally, Adrian was essentially in detox while he was in jail.
Correct.
Do you think it's fair to say that with his level of intoxication that he might not remember being beaten up by Officer Greer that evening?
I'm going to say a lack of foundation. This requires expert testimony as to memory, recall. I don't think a proper foundation has been laid.
I'm not sure in this proceeding that we need to qualify him as an expert. I think he has enough experience to testify to that.
The question again, I'm sorry.
In your training and experience, somebody who is intoxicated as Mr. Martell was on the date of his arrest, is it possible that he might not have remembered the beating that he received from Officer Greer that night?
Very possible.
I have no more questions.
Two questions. If that meeting occurred, correct? It could be that he was telling you the truth, Martell. Right? Could be that on a month after the incident, from March 20th until the day you took him to Loveless, all he knew he was beat up by somebody, didn't know who until April 21st. Could be possible that was his accurate memory, right? Between March 20th and April 21st?
So is that your question? It
Yes.
could be possible?
Yeah.
It could be possible.
Okay, and when you interviewed him, did you know what his BAC was?
When I interviewed him,
Yeah.
he had actually stayed the night in, he said that it was a detox center, a detox house.
Okay.
And I didn't have any odor of alcohol coming from him. And I got close to make sure, knowing that, he did have a history of alcohol problems.
Okay, that's a no?
That's a no.
Okay. All right, that's all I have, thanks.
I have just a couple, Cedric Bingston. When you were interviewing Adrian Martell, did you ask him any questions specific to Officer Greer's conduct or demeanor at the time of this incident?
When he said that he didn't remember anything outside of when they made contact with him upstairs, and then he believes that they took him straight and to a unit and placed him inside of that unit. I didn't want to over provide him information or give him something to try and spout back to me. I wanted to actually get a clean interview on him. So I didn't ask very many of those type of questions as far as in line of that time frame, because, again, I didn't want to give him information.
Did any of the other individuals that you interviewed in this case make any statements as to Greer's demeanor? other than Cadet Henry, obviously?
No, he was interviewed by Agent Vaughn. Even when I spoke with Derek Sublett, he didn't, he just said that the officer was punching straight down. He didn't say whether he was saying anything or he heard anything. He did make very specific note that he didn't know his name, but Adrian Marthel didn't appear to be making any noise, didn't appear to be resisting in any way. But no one made specific mention of, that I spoke with, Officer Greer's direct actions.
Thank you. Mr. Granada, anything further?
Nothing further from
The
me.
witness, Mr. Yamato?
No.
You can be excused.
You certainly.
Thank you, Agent Bigston, for your time and your testimony today.
Well, Mitch, be safe.
Will do. Take care.
I hope I don't see you this weekend.
Me too.
All right, Mr. Granada?
Take care.
I'll just briefly give a closing. Nothing that long by any means.
So for the record, you're not, Mr. Diamato, you're not, or the state rests?
State rests.
Are you presenting no witnesses?
Respondent rests.
Okay, very good, thank you.
All right, if I may.
You may.
Just briefly, I think that the evidence today shows that on March 20th, 2015, that Officer Greer punched Agent Marthel twice in the head, twice in the ribs. I think there's evidence that he abused his authority on other occasions during that same day, during his treatment of these individuals who are called down and outs. Coincidentally, the audio and video is lacking where Mr. Greer most needs to support his case. This case really comes down to the believability and the credibility of the witnesses. We have Cadet Henry, and there's no reason for Cadet Henry to put his whole career on the line and to make up a story about Officer Greer. There's been nothing to indicate that by any means did Officer Greer have a bone to pick with, did Cadet Henry have a bone to pick with Officer Greer? His testimony is credible. I do not believe there's any indication that he lied. I think there might be inconsistencies as to the way he remembers the event, particularly about whether or not it was Officer Greer or Officer Roush who cuffed the individual. I think these inconsistencies, however, are very minor. I think the fact that his statements have been consistent throughout to every individual that he spoke with. Furthermore, there is another individual who witnessed this event, Derek Sublett. He saw what looked like a confrontation. Officer Roush himself indicated that he had to rush over to Officer Greer because of the situation. Officer Greer was standing above the suspect, and it looked like Officer Greer needed the assistance of another officer. There's substantial evidence to support the fact that on this day, Officer Greer battered Adrian Marthel.
Thank you. Mr. Diamato?
You know, when two officers, 3 or 4 years on the department, testify in internal affairs and one testifies at a certification hearing, the same can equally be said. Why would anyone place their career, their vested career, in jeopardy for no apparent reason? I mean, for no apparent reason. The inconsistencies may be minor to counsel for the Attorney General's office, but the inconsistencies, in our opinion, are sufficient to raise question as to whether is this the type of case we're ready to revoke certification. Because we have a couple of things that are bothersome at the least. March 20th, the incident happens. April 20th, the interview with state police happens. Never identifies police officer as beating this individual up, Adrian Marthel. But overnight, he tells hospital staff at Loveless, the police beat me up. How and where that came from, if Marthel didn't say anything to anybody, or didn't speak with anyone to get that information, is beyond me. It's important also to know that Sergeant Cimbala said, despite being in the academy, those cadets are subject to the same SOP sanctions and policies as a police officer. The hearing officer makes a correct finding. That cadet is not sworn, he's not certified. There is nothing at risk. He's not going to lose his certification, and he may not lose his employment, because why he didn't render aid if this happened, why he didn't immediately report if this didn't happen. Those types of individual actions should be subject to LEA 90 action, or at least reviewed by the city of Albuquerque. It almost seems like we have one word against another, but all the evidence that Internal Affairs comes up with assumes one witness is telling the truth and one witness or two witnesses are lying. Roush testified or gave an interview to the state police officer. I don't know if he said he rushed over, he didn't remember if he ran or walked. Something was happening, all he knew was that Greer needed his assistance. Now, as to the cameras, the lapel cameras, if that's the standard the New Mexico Attorney General's office wants to use to determine guilt or innocence or revocation or suspension or no action, how is that standard applied to those certified officers who do not have the ability for lapel or inboard cameras? If we're going to impose a double standard, then let's be clear about it, because a policy violation does not necessarily equate to actions which support a suspension or a revocation. Counsel also, in his right to do so, objected to hearsay. Strip it all of hearsay. Strip the hearsay out of this completely. You have one officer, possibly two officers' words against the officer who testified, who is now an officer, patrol officer, second class. That's all. You didn't hear from Martel. You didn't hear from any of the witnesses who were present on the scene, except one officer who said it didn't happen, one officer said it did. And I mean, if SOP violations equate to just cause to suspend or decertify, then why, when presented at the Loudermill with the chief, did he not put both officers into a polygraph, which was requested and denied? Because the mind was made up. We have a great recruit, Air Force background, #1 in this class. He would never lie. Well, how do you make that bald assertion of someone lying when it's a death penalty in a police department case, it's a termination case if you're lying, and not explore anything further? The case would be on its head if it found out that Greer passes a polygraph and
Objection.
Andrew, this is closing.
There's nothing in the evidence about a polygraph test.
I'm not arguing polygraph's evidence, counsel.
Overruled.
But I mean, the standards that council wishes to impose are in large part not applicable to every agency across the state, which is what the board looks for: uniformity, notice. And so to rely on SOP violations is a cheap way of getting a revocation or suspension on a certification. Look at the merits of the case. I submit to you that when you look at the evidence as a whole, substantial evidence does not support a revocation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dumoto. That will conclude our proceedings for today. I will start working on my report, my decision,
Thank you.
and have a lot of work to do. Thank you all for your time today.
Thanks for your patience with us.
Yeah, just do that. That's great, appreciate it.
Okay?
All right, so I was asking when the video would be ready for me.
So, Mr. Hearing Officer, I'll make my best effort to get a copy to Mr. John D'Amato later on this week.
Okay.
And when we can agree upon everything that's on the video, I don't think there'll be much of a problem. We'll hopefully get that to you by Friday.
Okay, and we're gonna hold the record open until we have that video.
And absent that, I mean, to accommodate the hearing officer and Mr. Greer, we will do a limited time waiver should this go over Friday. I don't want you to rush to do this, so we'll do a limited time waiver until such time as he gets he being Mr. Granata, the CDs over to me. That's when the 30 days will start.
Perfect.
Is that fair?
And then I assume you live in Santa Fe?
I do.
So can you deliver an extra copy and I can pick up from, how am I gonna get it?
Just, you can mail them to both.
Yeah, I can mail it, or I can,
Okay.
I can perhaps send it to the AG's office in Albuquerque. and you
I can pick it up at the
it.
office there.
And I'll
That'd be
pick it up at
perfect.
Walter's office too.
Thank you.
Off with them.
We're off the record. Thank you, gentlemen, for being accommodating.
Thank you all.